Hey everyone, in today's video we're talking all about lenses, and more specifically adapting lenses and being able to use all different types of lenses, all different types of mounts on many different cameras. Now there are a lot of reasons why you might want to start adapting your lenses, and there's also a lot of reasons why it's not a good idea, why it's not really that fun, and why I don't really recommend it. I'm going to go over the pros and cons of using adapters, and I'm also going to be giving my advice and expressing what I think you guys should be doing when trying to figure out what lens mount works best for you and your camera and your scenario. So why would you want to go about doing this? Why would you want to pair a camera and a lens that the manufacturers really didn't expect to go together? Well, there's lots of reasons, but one of the biggest things that motivated me and really motivates everybody to do anything is finances. See, some camera manufacturers have a little bit of a different strategy from each other. This right here is the Tamron 100 to 400 millimeter lens, and I've adapted it to the Fujifilm X-T2 with this simple adapter. Fujifilm actually makes a 100 to 400 millimeter lens, and it works great. The pictures are sharp. It's really nice. The only catch is that it's $2,500. But this lens right here cost $1,000. That is a massive difference. And this is something that camera manufacturers do. They make lenses and they make cameras, and they decide, you know what, we want to make profits on one or the other. And they decide that they're going to sell their cameras at a pretty low price for everything that's packed in there. But then their lenses are really expensive to be able to compensate for that. So what's really great about adapting lenses is that you're kind of beating the system. Now, in my opinion, that's not a good enough reason to go out and buy adapters instead of just buying the native lenses that belong to the cameras originally, but it is a really nice perk. Now, a much better reason to go out and adapt lenses is because you have so many more options. I also bought the Sigma 18 to 35, and I love that lens so much. I use it all the time. I'm using it right now, actually, and I looked everywhere, but I just couldn't find a lens that was the same as the Sigma 18 to 35 for my Fujifilm X-T2. My only option was to use an adapter. Now, reason number 3 is that in certain circumstances, you get better performance when you pair different lenses and different cameras together. For the most part, if you're seeing someone who's using a traditional camera, you know, something like this, not their cell phone, not a GoPro, it's probably one of 3 different size sensors. There's micro four thirds, which is the smallest, there's full frame, which is the largest, and then there's APS-C, which fits somewhere in between these two. And there's a lot of different reasons why people prefer larger sensors over smaller sensors. Yes, when you have a smaller sensor, you tend to be able to have a smaller package, a smaller camera body, but larger sensors are really great too because they tend to do better in low light. I also much prefer the look of a larger sized sensor because different lenses have different ways of warping or distorting the image. And I'm finding that an APS-C or a full frame camera tends to reflect or be a little bit more accurate to how I see the world. But I'm kind of cheating here because I'm using a speed booster, an adapter that has a magnifying glass in it. So it's amplifying the size of the sensor, so it looks like it's a little bit larger than it actually is, helping me to get better performance in low light. And I can prove this by using a little bit of math. So the Sigma 18 to 35 millimeter lens has a 1.8 equivalent on a full frame sensor. That is how much light gets to the sensor on a full frame camera. But we're not using a full frame camera, we're using a micro four thirds camera, which is only half the size of a full frame camera. So you have to take 1.8 and multiply it by 2. So that gives us 3.6. That is a lot less light going to our camera. But because I'm using a speed booster, I get to add 0.67 to this equation. So 1.8 times 0.67 equals 1.2. I'm rounding up a little bit. And then if you take into account the size of the crop, you get a 2.4 instead of a 3.6. Sorry about all those numbers. I hate math more than anybody I know. Should have actually just called Gerald Undone to explain it all properly. But I think that it's really important that you do your homework to actually know what the specs you're getting out of your camera so that you're not just taking for granted whatever they advertise the specs are for your camera, because in reality, sometimes specs lie. Actually, most of the time specs lie. So yeah, we're still very far away from a 1.8 aperture on a full frame camera, but we're a lot closer to an APS-C size sensor than when we were first starting. But all that to say is that sometimes you get better performance from your camera if you're willing to go through the hassle of actually adapting your lenses. Stay in school, kids. Apparently you actually use this stuff when you grow up. Who knew? But this is the thing that I really love about adapters, is that you're able to keep some really old and really amazing lenses from years ago. This lens was made in the 60s. It's a 55 millimeter lens. It's got a 1.8 aperture, and it's the super multi-coated Takumar lens. This lens is my favorite of all, and I'm able to use it because of adapters. I mean, just listen to that sound. This is more than just an old 50mm lens. This lens has character. This lens is different from any lens that could ever be made. It has the most interesting flares and the most interesting characteristics. I use this lens all the time for all kinds of different creative works and all kinds of different short films that I do, and they're also really inexpensive. This lens here I got for $5. For being my favorite lens and only costing $5, it's just insane. And the adapters aren't that expensive either. This adapter only cost $20, so I could actually attach it to my Fujifilm X-T2. $20 Canadian, that's like 5 cents American or something ridiculous like that. And I have all kinds of different old lenses that have all these different characteristics, all these different flares, and it provides you with such a different and unique look that you'll never be able to find with these modern lenses. You got a push-pull lens? Like, what is this? This lens used to belong to my mom, and that's what's great about this too. If you go through your attic or your closet and you find an old camera or an old lens, you're still able to use it. You're able to use the tools from generations ago in your cameras today. But adapting lenses is not always great. Sometimes it's really annoying. And there are 3 main reasons why I don't like using these adapters. And 3 reasons why I don't recommend that you go out and use adapters for your cameras. Reason number 1 is that if you use adapters instead of using native lenses, you're not gonna have nearly as good of an experience and you're not gonna get the same performance from your camera that you should. Even though I'm getting a 100 to 400mm lens for $1,500 less than if I bought the Fujifilm equivalent, this is still a system that I would get really frustrated with and I don't enjoy using that much. When I'm trying to use this for sports or taking pictures of birds, the autofocus is garbage. It's so bad. It takes a really long time and it's like accurate only 40% of the time, if that. I know that if I was using the Fujifilm 100 to 400mm lens, the autofocus would be way better and the stabilization would be way better than this right here. The technology that is in this camera is very different from the technology in a Canon camera. Sometimes the 2 technologies are kind of fighting against each other and they're not really cooperating or communicating as a nice marriage between a camera and a lens should be. And as good as this adapter is and as hard as it's trying to be able to bring these 2 pieces of technology together, it just can't quite do it 100%. And to expect that it would just perform the same way as a native lens would is too much to ask. Focus, focus, come on, focus, focus. Why am I not getting focus? So most of the time, I'm not using autofocus when I'm using an adapted lens. One of the annoying things about adapting lenses is that adapters are hollow most of the time. They're really lightweight, so when you attach a lens to a camera, especially a really small camera and using a really big lens, it doesn't feel natural and it falls forward a lot and it just feels really heavy and unnatural. And this makes it really challenging when you're wanting to do things like use it on a gimbal or on a shoulder rig, and you kind of have to find the center of gravity, and that's sometimes really challenging to do when the center of gravity is at the very end of the lens. I also get a little bit nervous because that's a lot of weight being pulled on one single small area of the camera. That lens mount can only take so much before it breaks. Now, I don't really care because I saved so much money by buying this setup. Those mounts are also designed to hold up a lot of weight and take a lot of abuse, so I'm not too concerned about it, but it is something that does bother me a little bit. And lastly, it's just kind of quirky. There's a lot of things that Fujifilm does with their lenses to be able to make them a little bit more user-friendly with their cameras. Most Fujifilm lenses work like this, where you have an actual ring around the lens that works as the aperture ring. I don't have that with this lens or this adapter, so instead I have to use this scroll wheel, which is a little bit annoying. I would much rather have that same ring right here. It would just feel right. When you adapt lenses, you're gonna have to invest in things like battery grips. I really struggle using this setup on a tripod unless I have that battery grip, because then I can't really zoom in and out or adjust my focus. Because when you're using a lens that is larger than the native lens on a camera, the lens was rubbing up against the tripod plate, which is not really that great. So yeah, there's all kinds of different quirks and there's all kinds of different things that you might have to do to be able to modify or change your setup so that it works better for your needs. I don't like it. I would much rather use native lenses, but I feel like the pros for me outweigh the cons. So here's my advice when buying lenses and buying cameras and trying to figure out what system works best for you. Buy into one single system. Buy into one camera that is really ideal and meets your needs best, and invest in lenses and invest in your accessories for that specific camera. Now you might be asking yourself, William, you're not investing into one single system. You have a Panasonic, a Fujifilm, and Canon lenses. What the heck is going on? And the truth is, I am investing in one system. It's just not a system that I own quite yet. For years and years, I've been looking at the Canon C200 as being the perfect camera for my needs. Now I could buy Panasonic lenses and I could buy Fujifilm lenses, and then one day I might be able to get a Canon C200 and then pay for all these different lenses, but that's a lot more expensive than just buying one single type of lens. Because I know that one day I will be buying a Canon C200 or a Canon C500, one of these cinema cameras from Canon. I'm doing my very best to invest wisely in all kinds of different accessories and all different kinds of lenses, all these different things that will eventually lead up to that purchase. Because when you buy a camera, you're not just buying that camera. You need to buy the memory cards for that camera. You need to buy a cage for that camera. You need to buy lenses. You have to buy better tripods, and you have to buy better audio equipment that fulfills the needs and actually works well with that specific system that you're investing in. So every purchase I make, I'm wondering, will I be able to use this one day with my Canon C200? And if I'm purchasing something and I know that eventually it will help me lead up to buying a Canon C200 and I'll be using it with the Canon C200, that helps me to decide whether or not that purchase is a good idea or not. So my advice is to look for a system, whether it's Sony, Canon, Nikon, whatever it is, find a camera or find a system that you think works really well for your needs and invest into that system. Maybe not even having a camera yet for that system, but look forward to your purchases and invest wisely into that dream, into that goal that you have, so that it's able to come much quicker and it's a lot easier to transition into that particular system or that particular camera that you really want to buy one day. And as for buying older vintage lenses like this, definitely do it. It's so much fun, it's so worth it, and it's really not that expensive when you look at what you're getting for your buck. And sometime soon, when more stuff is open up and I'm actually able to record videos in places like secondhand stores and garage sales and all kinds of things like that, I'm going to show you guys how I find and how I buy these lenses for such a great deal. So if that sounds really good to you guys, go ahead and subscribe and click that bell icon so you know when that video is coming up. I hope this video was helpful to you guys in some way, shape, or form, and if it was, go ahead and hit that like button. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you next time. Take care.